Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a real-world review of the Nikon 8-15mm Fisheye. This challenge is to try to get some awesome fisheye shots using the brand new Nikon 8-15mm Fisheye. We're here in Philadelphia in front of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, aka where Rocky ran up the stairs, and we're going to shoot the building as well as some monuments, and also what would be using a fisheye if we didn't shoot skateboarding. So first up, I went up to the George Washington statue to try to get some awesome fisheye shots. One of the things you need to be careful about is when you shoot at 8mm, you're gonna have to take off the lens hood, because if you leave it on at 8mm, you're gonna see it in your final image. So at 15mm, the lens hood works perfect because that's what it's designed to do, but I found it easier to just leave it off the entire shoot because I didn't want to deal with, oh my God, I got some of the lens hood in my frame when it shouldn't be there. So when shooting with a fisheye, the closer you get to your subject, the more prevalent the fisheye effect is going to get. Also, changing your angle or which way you point your camera, whether it's up or down, will also affect how your image will end up looking. So you just have to try different angles. That's really what I have to say, is always try to get on the same level and the same plane, because if you're not, your image may look just slightly off and may not be able to be corrected later in post. So this is pretty tough with the 8mm. I'm right in front of this statue, and I got the sun, and the sun is behind me, and that's showing up in the 8mm. And also, if I don't tilt up high enough, my shadow's there on the ground. Something you'll notice with the lens is when you're shooting at 8mm, you see the barrel because it's a circle. Now, where do you stop seeing the inside of the barrel of the lens when you're taking photos? It's slightly past 14mm, almost all the way out to 15. So you just want to be careful that if you don't want to get any of that barrel in your image, you pretty much need to go to 15 for that. So here's a quick tip with the fisheye. I'm a big fan of lining everything up in the middle as much as possible. Now, it's not always the case, but in a majority of the cases with the fisheye, that makes sense. Now, I noticed that I thought I was in the middle shooting the statue behind me, and then I was like, wait a second, this sidewalk impression, or it's not a crack, but the line right down the middle is in essence lining up with the middle of the statue. So if I stand there and I put my focus point right in the middle, well, I should have a centered image. I wonder what vertical does. Though I don't think vertical really affects your circle. If you're shooting a circle, it's still a circle even if you shoot vertical. Let's take a look. This is horizontal. This is vertical. And they're the circles, so it's the same thing. If you like big butts, then get a fisheye lens and get super close to it because it's gonna make them look voluptuous. The one thing I noticed coming from the Nikon 16mm f2.8 to this fisheye, when I'm out at 15mm, because it's a variable aperture lens, it's at f4.5. The first thing I noticed when I looked through the viewfinder was how much darker it was because it's not gathering as much light as the old 2.8 did. But in terms of image quality, I don't really think you're gonna notice much of a difference because you're shooting so wide.
Oh, he taught me to use
Oh, that's cool. No problem. Enjoy Philly. So when I illegally walked across the street when there was the "Do Not Walk" sign, I got to the other side because I wanted to get shots of the stairs with the art museum in it. Try to get all of the Rocky stairs in there, and that's where the fisheye came in handy. But I will tell you, at 8mm, being far away from things, it kind of just looks like a snapshot. It looks stupid. I gotta find out where it's actually useful, other than as a Postman Fro intro, but it's just like, cool, a circle shot, I got everything. So what is the difference between fisheye and rectal linear? Well, with fisheye, you get that bowing effect around the edges, and with rectal linear, you kind of get more of a straighter line with the bowing happening the other way ever so slightly. But I did notice at 15 millimeters with this lens, if I was to put, say, the Rocky Stairs more on the top, right above the center, and leveled off my camera, it almost looked rectal linear. It still had a little bit of a curve, but if I was to crop that and get a panoramic shot, it may look like it's not a fisheye. I'm gonna see if sitting on my tuchus allows me to get straighter lines than if I'm just kneeling or squatting down, because I'm gonna try and be as level as possible to make sure that I'm straight, not just only this way, left to right and top to bottom, because if I'm off on the any axis, the photo just doesn't look as good. The lens hood is a pain in the ass. You gotta take it on, you gotta take it off. How do you keep track and organize all of the gear that you own? Well, if you're sitting there keeping track of it in a spreadsheet, I have something much better for you. Check out my brand new app called My Gear Vault. It's the best way to input, organize, and protect your gear so you know what you have and what it's worth. You can download it right now for free. Head on over to mygearvault.com. So I'm locking my focus on the stairs, tilting up, not rocking back, boom. Kind of looks cool, as long as I don't overdo it at least. So not every shot with the fisheye has to be lined up right in the middle in terms of where your horizon is. You can get creative with it and make a really big bowing effect. That's exactly what I did in front of the stairs. I pre-focused, tilted up to try and get the stairs to get this really cool bowing effect, and I think it worked out really well. See, I get what's called shooting face. You see how my face is looking like this? It's kind of like guitar solo face when guitarists are all like, I'm like this shooting. I don't know what it does, but I think you need to have a good shooting face in order to get good photos. Tripping wouldn't be good, but it does say push-ups. I should probably do some push-ups. Yeah. Burpees! I did it! That was two one-armed push-ups. After running up the stairs, I thought I would try shooting some photos of the water feature, aka the water fountain. Now it did say no swimming allowed, so I didn't want to jump in there. I got some okay shots there at 15, and I did get something interesting at 8 when I tilted my head all the way back, almost looking straight up, but not all the way. I got the entire art museum, I got the water feature, and I even had the flagpoles that were 30 feet behind me in the image. One thing you need to be careful about when you're shooting at 8 millimeters is that you don't get your shadow or your feet or your hands or anything else in the image. Because you're shooting a circle at 8 millimeters, almost everything is going to be in it, and sometimes my hair may blow a certain way and my hair may get in the frame. So you have to be careful when you're shooting this wide, especially at 8. You just want to make sure that you don't have bogeys, especially your own, like your feet or your body parts, or if somebody is even standing behind you, they may still show up in the frame, especially if you're shooting at 8 millimeters. I think the building isn't straight. I don't think it's me that's not straight. I think the building isn't straight. It's probably me though. That's 8. This is 10. This is 12. 14. And 15. One of the most important things to keep in mind when you're shooting with the fisheye lens is that you want to try to get your frame as even as possible, left to right, top to bottom. You want that symmetry because if you're off by an angle, if you're not directly in the middle, you can see it in the final results and you may not be able to make the correction in post in Lightroom. So just be careful when you're shooting. Try to get everything as symmetrical as possible to get the best results.
trying not to have shooting face. It's a disease, shooting face.
So I want to try and get some inside shots here at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Now I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but I'm either going to go in there and just take a couple photos till I'm told not to, or I may just ask if it's okay to do it. But before I go in, I know it's not 100 ISO in there, so I realize that if I'm gonna have to move quick, I'm gonna have to guess my settings and then figure it out from there. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do right now. Can I take a picture right there and then walk out? I'm gonna shoot straight up in the sky. Another thing you need to be careful about is when you're looking straight up with the circular fisheye, if your angles are off at all, it's just gonna look terrible. So what is a better way to use a fisheye than skateboarding photos? I know a lot of people love using fisheye for that, and so having the option of an 8mm and having the option of a 15mm will come in handy for skateboarding. So we worked our way over to the skate park, Paynes Park. So luckily enough, we met a skater in the park named RJ who was kind enough to allow us to photograph him in a couple of different situations. Now this is the first time I'm using this lens to shoot skateboarding, and we all know that I'm no skateboarding expert when it comes to taking photos, but I know this was a good opportunity to see how it would handle and how it would work out. Now trying to shoot these photos is interesting because you have to get super close. Well, you have to get super close at 8mm, and at 15, you don't have to get as close. We were shooting at noon and the sun was straight up, so we didn't have a lot of fill light in RJ's face, which made for slightly darker images that I should be able to bring back in post. Normally, we would have shot earlier in the day or later in the day. It just fell that way when we were testing out this lens. I'm just gonna make pretend I'm a skater boy. I listened to Avril Lavigne's song and I was like, yes. If you really want to exaggerate that fisheye effect, get super close to your subject. The closer you get to it, the more pronounced the bowing's gonna be, and it does come in handy every once in a while, but again, remember, do it a little bit, then put that lens away and move on to something else. I sit in the trash can with it upside down and I get a photo from in the trash. You're gonna get over that? So one thing I noticed is it's really cool to get him in the frame, especially at 15mm, but after a while it just seems boring because I'm shooting the same shot. He's coming towards me. I take 8 frames in a row, I take 10 frames in a row, and I'm like, yep, that's the shot. And it just doesn't feel as creative, at least for me. Fisheye is a challenge. It really is a challenge to try and get good shots. You use it sparingly. You use it to get the shot that you need, and then you put it in the bag and you forget about it. So we all know that fisheye lenses are generally not meant for portraits, but I figured I would take some sample shots anyway so that you guys could pixel peep and see how they looked. How did they work out? They're okay. They're nothing special, at least on the back of the camera, but maybe in post when I edit the raw files, they'll come to life and I'll be pleasantly surprised. Because that's the thing, is try to be creative, especially with this fisheye. Maybe something will work out and turn out to be a great shot. Oh, well, I can't do this because I got my entire shadow in there. It doesn't work. Now, can you get bokeh with a fisheye lens? And the answer is yes. When I was shooting the skateboarder, I had him hold the skateboard out so I could focus on that, or I focused on his fingers and the background was blown out. Now that just shows you that even at 15mm, you can still get bokeh even at 4.5, so it is possible. Honestly, it gets really boring shooting a fisheye. Seriously, all you care about is getting the guy in the frame, and that's it. That's it. It's like not even creative. My #1 rule of thumb with fisheye photography is don't overdo fisheye photography. It's kind of addicting. You start taking photos and you're like, wow, I got everything in the frame, but after a while it just becomes boring. My recommendation to you is if you pick up a fisheye lens, you get the shot that you need, then you pack up that lens and you put it in the bag and you forget about it for the rest of the shoot. Do you know that I have 4 different educational video guides? I have the Fronos Photo Guide to Getting Out of Auto, the Fronos Photo Guide to Flash Photography, the Fronos Photo Guide to DSLR Video, and the Fronos Photo Guide to Video Editing. If any of those sound interesting to you, check out a free preview at fronosphoto.com/guides. Now, if you're wondering what this lens looks like for video, well, this is what it looks like on the full-frame Nikon D5 shooting at 1080 at 15mm. This is what it looks like as you go all the way to 8. This is 8 going through the range to 15, and as you can see, it's not that bad at 15. At 8mm, it's awfully interesting, but everywhere in between, you're still gonna see the barrel from inside the lens. So it's a limiting lens when it comes to video, but it may come in handy in very few situations. That's it from the art museum. It's now time to send it back to the factory to see how the images look. So here we are back at the loft to take a look at the Keeper images, and I want to remind you that you can head over to the website to download the full res exported JPEGs, as well as download sample RAW files that you can pixel peep to see how you think this lens did. So let's take a look at the images. Now, the first thing that you see right here is I was shooting at 8mm, except I had the lens hood on. The lens hood does not do you any good unless it's on at 15mm. So you have to make a decision. Do you take the lens hood off? Well, obviously you take it off when you're shooting wider than 15, or you have to make that decision, you just leave it on and all you're going to shoot is 15. So let's go through some of these images. So you can see it's a basic fisheye shot. In terms of clarity, super duper sharp. I was pretty happy. Not pretty happy, I was really happy with how sharp this lens was compared to my old 16mm 2.8 fisheye that Nikon made. Also, if you shoot on Canon and you're looking for a Canon fisheye, they make an 8-15mm f4 that's priced the same as the Nikon. You could also look third party. Sigma has circular fisheyes and other companies do as well. But I was really happy with how sharp this was edge to edge. Even when you get into the corners, you see how sharp it is all the way through the entire frame. Now, on some of the images, you'll see some chromatic aberration. That's some of that purple fringing that goes on in the images. It's really impossible to get rid of that. That's just something that shows up wider when you use those fisheye lenses. So here, I wanted to show you the same thing. This is what you're doing at 15mm. This is what you get at 8mm. How useful is this? Well, that's determined upon how useful this image is to you in terms of, do you want to take every picture and have it look like this? I don't, but it does come in handy in certain places. Now, moving on, this is the fisheye at 15mm. I didn't have the lens hood on, but there doesn't seem to be lens flare, even though the sun, I almost said the flare, but it's the sun was all the way up in the sky because it was about 11:30 when we were doing this shoot, and it looks pretty good. It doesn't look like it affected the image, which is good for the lens because it means it has a lot of good coatings on it, so it's cutting back on any flare that may be happening. But you can see the effect you get with the fisheye. This is the effect you get with the fisheye if you get your lines wrong. So try not to get your lines wrong and you won't end up with a shot that looks like this, that looks like you're just falling over. Moving on, you can see right in the middle. So right in the middle of the image, you can see it's almost pretty straight. It bows just a little bit, but the more you put something at the top or the bottom of the frame, the more prevalent the fisheye is going to get. If you want the stairs, the rocky stairs, to smile at you, you can do this. Or that, and that's going to show you what's happening right there. Let me show you over here in the edge what I was talking about. You see some of that purple fringing right there? That's what you see around the edges of the frame. It's usually really bad when it comes to less expensive lenses. I don't worry about stuff like that. I think people looking at the final images are going to be, they're never going to sit there and say, what is this purple fringing? They don't care. They don't see it because they're not pixel peeping, but that doesn't make it right that it does that. I just also don't know what would correct that in a lens manufacturing thing because I don't make lenses. This is your 8mm. As you can see, I'm having some trouble talking about where the 8mm actually comes in to play. I do think that if you took two pictures, one this way, one that way, because the lens is 180 degrees, you could stitch it together to get a 360-degree image that would look pretty cool if you uploaded it onto Facebook. And I am curious to see, and I may test this out, if I took 4 images and then had it stitched together. One forward, one back, one left, one right, standing in the same spot, or on a tripod that has Clicky McClickersons in there. It could be interesting to see how that works out. Now, this is what happens if you apply lens correction. Now, currently, if we look over here, I am correcting it to a Sigma 8mm because the Nikon correction hasn't been updated in Lightroom yet, so I manually went in and tweaked it after I used the Sigma. But look what happens to it. It's actually not that bad. But what you need to know is whatever in the center is going to be super duper sharp, and as you get to the edges, you see that it's not looking too good over there. But it doesn't look that bad. So the rule of thumb is if you know that you're going to shoot circle to try to get something in there, something important in the entire frame, just know if they're near the edge, it's not going to work out if you flatten it out. But if you use the 8mm and you tilt yourself up, you can get some really cool results just like this, and I was happy with this image. You just got to be careful with your lines. It looks like I am slightly off, and it's not easy to get that perfect, but I was darn close. This is, again, an 8mm one with lens correction. It actually works out pretty well. This looks, I mean, look how straight the lines end up looking, and this was done in Lightroom with the raw file, so I'm happy with that. Now I want to show you, you've seen 8mm. This is what it looks like at 10mm. You can still see a lot of the edge of the blackness. Then moving on, you've got 12mm, you still see it. At 14mm, it's even less prevalent, so you could almost get away with it at 14mm, but then it's 15mm, you have no more of that black line there around the edges. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like from 8 all the way to 15. It's kind of like this lens should really be 8mm or 15mm, because I'm not really sure why you need the in-between. If you'd like to become a better photographer in only 11 days, I have a free mini video course that you can check out and download for free right now at froknosphoto.com/11days. So moving on to skateboarding. People love fisheyes with skateboarding. Now this is 8mm as you can see, and look, the sun is right here, and I'm not really seeing a lot of lens flare. That's pretty good that the sun can be shooting right into a lens. Well, that's lens flare, Jared, right? But it's not that bad. That doesn't make it right, but I don't think it takes away from the image in this case, though it's just a shot of a guy skateboarding with a fisheye circular on there. Now this is at the 15mm. You can see that we are at, 4.5 all the way out. That brings up one more thing. It's 3.5 at 8mm, and all the way out at 15, you've got your 4.5. Is it that big of a deal that it's not a 2.8 or an f4? Absolutely not, because what's going to be in focus is pretty much everything unless you get super close to your subject, which you're going to see in just a second. But here the lens flare looks even worse. So I probably should make that decision that if I know I'm shooting at 15, I put the lens hood on. I'm a big proponent of always using lens hoods. I just didn't use it for this one because I was like, well, I'm going to shoot 8, I'm going to shoot 15. I should have put it on. That's my fault. I'm going to make sure from here on out, if I'm shooting at 15, it's always going to be on to cut down on any stray light coming in. Just thought this was a good one at 15. Let's look at the edges. A little out over here and a little bit of fringing going on, but it looks good. Looks good to me. This is where you test out to see, can you blow out the background and get some bokeh going on? And the answer is yes. I got super close to RJ right here, and I was able to focus in on the skateboard, and then he is out of focus in the background. Now, it's not the cleanest looking bokeh compared to, say, a 105 1.4. That's going to give you some super clean bokeh. But at the end of the day, does anybody really know the difference between good bokeh and not so good? You can kind of see it in some of the cheaper lenses where it just looks blotchy, but for the most part, you're not going to shoot this lens like this doing portraits, but you can get this effect, and it looks fine. I have no problem with how the background looks with this. Moving on, that's what a portrait would look like at 15mm. Yep, it's a portrait. And if somebody likes it, good job. That's all that matters. Moving on, focus onto the hand as close as I could get to it, just to show you what we can do with blowing out the other parts of the images. When I say blowing out, I'm talking about out of focus, not blown out in terms of the exposure. And it looks like we have a parachuting rainbow popping into this from the lens flare. And again, that's where the lens hood would come in handy, because this was probably around 1:30, 2 o'clock, where the sun was really high up in the sky. Moving on, boom. Another thing you'll notice, that when you shoot ultra wide, you're gonna get other things in the image. In this case, we have Steven, who was shooting the video of me. I didn't mind for the purposes of shooting the sample images, but you just have to be careful with your backgrounds when you are shooting ultra wide. Just know you're gonna get a lot of stuff in those frames. And then it finishes off at 8mm. You got to get really close to your subject, which means you can't be scared when they're coming towards you, and you just have to be careful. So the big question is, who's it for? Now, I will just put this out there as a PSA that fisheyes are meant to be used sparingly. I don't think it should be your first lens, your second lens. The third lens that you purchase is probably somewhere around the fourth, fifth, or sixth lens that you add to your bag. It's a specialty lens, which means you bring it out on special occasions, you use it sparingly, then you put it away. You don't keep using it, because if you overdo it, it's just gonna look bad. The more you shoot the fisheye, the worse it looks, and it also isn't that creative for the most part. But if you're shooting wedding ceremonies or wedding parties on the dance floor, it could be a fun little effect that the client may actually like when you deliver a photo at 8mm of people dancing on the floor with all the lights and the colors going on. That could be a good use for it. It's great when you're shooting concerts for that one shot where you need to get everybody in it, or when you're doing some sort of landscape or architectural type thing. Not saying it's going to give you straight lines for architecture, but it can show you the entire scene. So that's where that lens comes in handy. So at the end of the day, how was the quality of this glass, and am I happy that I spent $1,249 on this lens? Well, no, I don't like spending money on just about anything, but this was a good purchase for the times when I actually need to use this lens to get that shot, like I just said, to get the shot that I need. It's sharp, much sharper than the older Nikon 16 fisheye. The colors and clarity and tones are very nice, and it's nice to have that 8mm option for when you want to get an interesting effect, but also still want that 15mm fisheye to get the shots that you're looking for. So I'm very happy with the lens. If you're looking for a fisheye, especially for Nikon full frame, this would be the one that I would recommend. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Don't forget you can download sample RAW files over on the website. And I thank you very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya. Is anybody in there? Hello? I've got a package.